must be equipped with life skills to identify risks, protect themselves, speak up, and accept support. The challenge now is to ensure that the determination and courage to prevent, address, and end violence is there, that the required budget is in place, and the coordination mechanisms are available and functional to achieve our final goal of ending violence against children. Building on the survey funding and the Data to Action framework, Jamaica recently participated in one of the most important international events on the topic, the first global ministerial conference on ending violence against children convened by UNICEF, PAHO, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, and the governments of Colombia and Switzerland. Jamaica was among more than 120 countries which presented pledge to end violence against children. The conference drew on the highest expertise in the field, raised the voices of the victims, and showed the commitment of a great community convinced about the importance of childhood free from violence. Jamaica committed to advancing the programs that will ensure that the schools are safe and enabled environments, to ensure services are responsive and supportive through the implementation of an early warning system, and the digital world is safe and secure for children and doesn't cause them any harm. Jamaica is taking steps in the right directions. The data and knowledge are there. The actionable framework of proven intervention has been defined, and the political will has been demonstrated. Let me make an appeal to parents. We know that the vast majority of you are trying your best to raise your children in the best way possible. But let me share with you that studies have shown that a successful parenting process is possible without violence. Take the courage to stop and change. You deserve support. You can look for it and strongly claim it. By learning and developing positive parenting practices, your children will build a strong self-confidence, solid social ties, and firm values. And as the data has shown, they will also be more productive. To the communities and schools, I say, if you see something, say something. This must become a part of the community's culture. There is nothing more difficult for a victim than to see a loving relative or a friend keeping silence. The communities should be the first responders. We have heard it say so many times that it takes a village to raise a child. I encourage the village in Jamaica to take a stand to protect their children and prevent violence. Last but not least, UNICEF is urging decision makers to keep the promise to children in the 35 years of the Convention of the Child of the Right, and act with additional courage and sense of urgency as the reality deserves. As we gather here today, I want to acknowledge the resilience and courage of many of you and others who have survived a violent childhood experience. I also want to thank and acknowledge the tireless effort of all the partners who worked to make this survey and report a reality. Let me thank the U.S. government, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, SPARE, the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric Aid Foundation, Statin, Together for Girls, and the University of the West Indies for collaborating on this research. UNICEF remains committed to help advance the good pace that Jamaica has established. We are here for you, but more importantly, we are here for each and every child. Thank you.
Safe environments, communities, schools and homes, responsive services. That is how we can be there for every child in Jamaica. Thank you, Ms. Olga Isaza. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard that this partnership was made possible with support as well from the U.S. government. Joining us today is the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Kingston, Jamaica, a senior Foreign Service member with over 20 years in the U.S. Department of State. She has served in key roles worldwide, including assignments at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations and embassies in Karachi, Casablanca, Madrid, and Beirut. We're grateful for the U.S. government's partnership in making this study possible. So please help me welcome Ms. Amy Tashko.
I'm going to try to make this not reverberate. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Good afternoon to everyone. I think we can safely say at this point that all protocols have been observed, so I'm going to skip to the chase. Today marks a really significant moment as we release the findings from the 2023 Violence Against Children and Youth Survey in Jamaica. This groundbreaking initiative was made possible through the collaborative support and funding of approximately $1.3 million from PEPFAR, the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, in partnership with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, thank you, Dr. Henry, and the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF. Thank you, Mrs. Sasa. The Violence Against Children survey represents our collective commitment to understanding the prevalence and impact of violence affecting young people, which is a significant and urgent social and health issue that affects the lives of countless children across Jamaica, unfortunately. By collecting data on physical, emotional, and sexual violence, we gain the ability to identify trends, risk factors, and most importantly, real and specific opportunities for intervention. The insights gained from this survey have already provided essential evidence-based data, which will be used as a foundation for informed and impactful policy development. In Jamaica, the National Children's Registry reports that it annually records a range of 12 to 14,000 incidences of child abuse, and those are just the ones they've recorded. If you do the math, that is 900 to 1,200 reports monthly, a deeply troubling reality. This is a serious problem that can have some unpredictable, lifelong consequences, affecting both the physical and well-being, and mental health of the survivors. However, it's important to remember that resorting to violence is not inevitable. There is more than enough evidence to show that by understanding the problem, steps can be taken to prevent it. The Violence Against Children survey provides the evidence needed to develop effective prevention strategies. The United States is committed to partnering with the people of Jamaica to secure a safer future for the nation's children. Evidence-based programming is a cornerstone of sustainable change. These findings will empower Jamaican communities, policymakers, and organizations with the knowledge needed to address root causes, promote resilience, and support a safer and more prosperous society for all. By investing in prevention programs and ensuring appropriate support for survivors while holding perpetrators accountable, we can create a safer environment and, I assure you, significantly improve the well-being of all children and youth in Jamaica. I commend and applaud the dedication of everyone involved in this effort, and I look forward to the positive impact that will emerge from this partnership. Let us continue to work together to create a Jamaica where all children can grow, thrive, feel secure, and realize their full potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tashko, reminding us that from this survey, we will get real and specific opportunities for intervention, leading to a safer and more prosperous society for all, but especially for the children of Jamaica. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, regrettably, the Minister of Education, Skills and Youth and Information could not be here with us today. However, we're pleased to welcome Mr. Otis Brown, Director, Regional Education Services for Region 1, to bring greetings on behalf of the ministry. Mr. Brown?
Mrs. Kemisha Swaby, our moderator, Miss Amy Tashko, Deputy Chief of Missions at the Embassy of the United States of America in Jamaica, Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Dr. Wayne Henry, Country Director, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Dr. Paul Young, Senior Public Health Specialist, Strategic Information, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Jamaica, Dr. Kellyanne Gordon Johnson, to our panelists from the National Parenting Support Commission, the Chief Executive Officer herself, Ms. Kesia Carr, UNICEF U-Report Youth Council member, Ms. Rihanna Robinson, National Secondary Schools Student Council President, Ms. Laurel Williams, and the Kingston Teen Hub Manager, Mr. Rory Roberts. Other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a privilege to stand here today at the Planning Institute of Jamaica's launch of the Violence Against Children and Youth Survey, that's the VAX report. This signifies a critical step forward in understanding and addressing the deeply rooted issue of violence against children and young people in our society. Today, as we discuss the findings, we also are confronted with the realities that affect the lives of so many of our young people. This report represents the hard work and dedication of many. PIOJ, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that's the CDC, UNICEF, and the Together for Girls Partnership. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of these organizations. This collaborative effort proves the power that comes when nations and institutions come together, unified by the shared purpose of creating a safer, more supportive world for our young people. The findings in this report are sobering. They show us that violence is not just an isolated issue, but a widespread crisis affecting over 77% of the young people in Jamaica land we love. It takes various forms, some of which are physical, emotional, and sexual, and it reaches into our homes, unfortunately our schools, and the communities, reminding us that violence is a challenge that we all must confront. For the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information, these findings are more than just statistics. They represent a roadmap, a powerful tool to guide our efforts in creating safer spaces for the learning and growth, not just within our schools, but across every environment where our youth live, learn, and interact. They call on us to ensure that education is not only about academic achievements, but also about fostering resilience, promoting safety, and supporting mental and emotional well-being. The data also offers insight into the gendered nature of violence. We see that young females experience higher rates of sexual and emotional abuse, while young males are often more exposed to physical violence and, in some cases, feel the need to carry weapons for self-defense. These distinctions reveal the unique challenges that our young women and men face, and they demand and deserve responses that are as specific and sensitive. This understanding will be central as we design targeted, gender-sensitive interventions to protect all youth. Beyond the individual impact, the effects of violence ripples through education, health, and mental well-being. Many young people who have experienced violence report disruptions in their schooling, with too many missing valuable time from their classes. Imagine what is lost when a child already bearing such a burden loses access to the one place where they should feel safe, where they should feel supported and free to learn. The cost is high, not just in academics, but in self-confidence and hope for a better future. Equally troubling is a gap in service utilization. While about half of our young people know where to seek help, only a small fraction reach out. For those affected by sexual violence, only 1 in 10 sought professional services, and for physical violence, only 1 in 5. These numbers reflect a deep issue, one of trust, accessibility, and the need for systems that meet our youth where they are. Our ministry, as a cornerstone of child development in Jamaica, will work to bridge this gap, ensuring that every young person who needs support can find it without fear or hesitation. This will mean expanding mental health services within our schools, training teachers to recognize signs of distress, and building trusted pathways for students to seek help. Today, I am encouraged by the Data to Action framework built from these findings to drive real change. This framework connects directly with the National Plan of Action for an Integrated Response to Children and Violence. That's the NPA-CV, which will be strengthened to take on the challenges before us. For the ministry, this framework provides clear actions and commitment, aligning policy with practice. Equally important is our commitment to improving mental health support for young people. We know that healing from violence requires more than just laws. It requires compassionate, accessible mental health and psychosocial services that allow children to rebuild their lives with hope and dignity. In line with this, we are committed to increasing the resources available within the education system to support the mental health of our students. This could mean the training of more counselors and the creation of additional child protection and family services agencies, that's the CPFSA therapeutic centers. We have also undertaken a number of initiatives to improve school safety. These include a safe school development policy with budgetary support from UNICEF and a strategic and significant investment in 34 schools. They are served in 7 declared zones of special operations through a program called the Interministerial School Support Strategy, the ISSS. In closing, let me express my sincere gratitude to everyone involved in bringing this report to life. The insights we've gained are more than numbers on a page. They are a call to action for each of us, a reminder that we all play a role in building a Jamaica where every child can grow up without being fearful. Today, as we look forward, let's commit ourselves to turning this data into meaningful action. Together, across ministries, communities, and sectors, we can create a Jamaica where every child feels safe, valued, and free to dream. And ladies and gentlemen, while I served in one of Jamaica's high schools, as principal, I usually say to my children, at every opportunity I get, anger, A-N-G-E-R, is one letter away from danger. If we could just help them to manage anger. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, who shared with us what we know. The cost of violence against our children and youth is high. And we, through this data, have been given a roadmap for action. And I think we've sat here and are quite ready to hear more details of the survey. I imagine there may be things that shock us, but beyond all that, what will it call us to do? What will we use the data to move towards action for? So to present the detailed findings of the survey, I invite Dr. Kellyanne Gordon-Johnson, Senior Public Health Specialist in Strategic Information at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, in Jamaica. Before she begins, let's watch a brief video to introduce and get a flavor of her presentation.
Violence against children and youth impacts families, communities, and the future. To prevent it, we first need to understand it. The 2023 Violence Against Children and Youth Survey, led by the Planning Institute of Jamaica, with support from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, Together for Girls and UNICEF, reveals important information about violence faced by youth in Jamaica.
It will provide us, the government and its stakeholders, with insight into the prevalence of emotional, physical and sexual violence against children and youth, ages 13 to 24 years.
The VAC survey allows us to understand what is happening, what are the effects of the violence, and how to improve the decisions that everybody is taking to stop the violence.
This instrument will serve as a very critical tool that will assist the government of Jamaica in addressing matters relating to violence in a proactive way.
The Violence Against Children and Youth Survey shows that more than 3 out of every 4 children and youth in Jamaica have experienced some form of violence. Girls are more vulnerable to sexual violence.
My first experience with being abused was when I was 9. I was molested by a family friend. At the age of 13, I was sexually abused again. Few years after that, I got molested again when I was 15.
The study found that physical violence, often from parents or caregivers, is common, affecting 1 in 3 youth. Emotional abuse is widespread, as is community violence, according to the survey. Nearly 1 in 3 young people felt close to someone who had been murdered.
I had to watch my brother die because of gang violence. I was forced to sit and watch him get tortured and then killed.
About 1 in 4 females and 1 in 3 males report knowing about gang activity in their school.
The Ministry of Education has a massive role to play because we are the superintendent of the education system.
Nearly 1 in 2 females and about 2 in 5 males witnessed physical violence in their homes, and over half witnessed it in their neighborhoods, leaving lasting emotional scars.
It was that trauma that brought me a mental illness called DID, that's dissociative identity disorder, where I would switch personalities to protect myself every time I felt triggered. I used self-harm as one of my ways to get out of things, and I was exposed to drugs. I tried overdosing once, didn't work. I locked out the world. I didn't talk to anybody at all. I used alcohol as a way to cope with everything that I went through.
The study showed that only half of affected youth knew where to seek help.
My message to teens out there like myself, I would really like you guys to know that there are people out there that really care about you and really want to hear your stories and help you. Despite all the things that I have been through in life, I focused on the main goals, and I am heading to get my degree so I can make better of myself and not be trapped in the world that I grew up in.
Violence is preventable, and change is within reach once the data gathered through the study is used.
The most important thing is to do proof and evidence-based solutions. One is to improve the parenting programs. Second, to ensure that the schools are safe and responsive to violence against children. And third, to strengthen all the social services and the justice services to ensure that children that has been victims of violence have all the possibility to be protected.
The VAX is so important because it looks at how do we create a better, safer, healthier environment for our children and our youth.
The government of Jamaica and even the CPFSA would benefit from incorporating strategies that will aid in mitigating against violence in Jamaica.
When people see data and understand it's empirical and real, it will make a difference, and it's something that is forcing us to pay attention.
Ms. Kamisha Swaby, moderator, Dr. Wayne Henry, Chairman and Director General of the PIOJ, Ms. Amy Tashko, Deputy Chief of Mission, U.S. Embassy Kingston, Dr. Paul Young, Country Director, CDC Caribbean Office, Ms. Olga Izaza, Representative of UNICEF Jamaica, Dr. Richard Amenya, UNAIDS Multi-Country Director, Mr. Otis Brown, Director, Regional Education Service, Regional 1, Ministry of Education, Skills, Information, Youth and Information. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to present the findings of the Jamaica Violence Against Children and Youth Survey 2023. So I will set the stage, and I think we've heard a lot about what's happening in terms of the context for Jamaica, and then I'll move into the Jamaica VAX 2023 process, key findings, and takeaway. So what is the context of violence related to children in Jamaica? We heard already that globally, significant number of children are impacted by violence annually. Global murder rates in 2021 was estimated to be 5.8 per 100,000 population. While murder rates vary across the globe, the Caribbean and Central America are global hotspots. Jamaica has one of the highest homicide rates in the world, 60.9 homicides per 100,000 population, and that was as at 2023. Violence in children and youth is a frequently reported issue. Violence also impacts not just the individual, but their experiences. Children and youth who experience violence have higher risk of health and social problems. There are many initiatives being implemented in Jamaica to support violence prevention and response. Nevertheless, there was a lack of comprehensive national level data on the magnitude, impact, and context of violence against children in Jamaica. Therefore, the Jamaica VAX provides the country with estimates on the prevalence of sexual physical and emotional violence, identifies associated risks and protective factors, and health and social consequences, as well as knowledge and use of medical, psychosocial, legal, and protective services among children and youth in Jamaica. There are now huge opportunities to translate the VAX into action. So the VAX is a national household survey that now stands as a gold standard globally for youth violence and data, and includes a robust data to action process, and is a premier source of broader risk and protective factors. The Jamaica VAX is the first representative national data on burden of sexual, physical, and emotional violence against children and youth here in our island home. So what were the objectives? First, we wanted to estimate the prevalence of physical, emotional, and sexual violence, look at the association between violence and HIV risk factors. And of course, you might say, why specifically HIV? Our funding comes from PEPFAR, and HIV is our primary focus. So there is some HIV elements to the work that we've done with the VAX. We also identified risk and protective factors for violence. We looked at health and social consequences associated with violence, areas for future research, looked at knowledge and utilization of services for children who have experienced violence, and coming out of this, we're supposed to be able to make recommendations to relevant ministries in Jamaica and partners on how we can prevent and respond to violence against children among our population. So let me try to explain the methodology, summarize it. As I said before, it's a national household survey. So it's a cross-sectional, representative household-based survey among 13 to 24-year-olds, both females and males, and it's designed to produce national estimates of experience of physical, sexual, and emotional violence among our youth and children. The target population, as I said, is 13 to 24-year-olds. We use the 2011 Jamaica population and housing census as our sampling frame, and we stratified for sex and parish. To be included in the survey, you had to be living in the household that we selected. You had to be, of course, within the age of 13 to 24. We didn't use younger because we know they may not be able to interpret some of the questions that we're asking based on age. And we didn't use older than 24 because we wanted to reduce recall bias, remembering what happened in the past. Additionally, you had to be able to speak English. And unfortunately, if you had a severe disability that impacted your capacity to understand, you were eliminated from the process. We used a split sample. So separate sample drawn for males and females based on the required sample, and we ensured the unit of sampling that we did, that we didn't mix males and females, because you didn't want to interview a victim and a perpetrator, and then the person would be able to know what the questionnaire was about in whoever the victim was. So to reduce the risk to the participant, we ensure that sampling was done for males and females in separate, what we call primary sampling units. In terms of extensive training and protocols, we went through a 2-week training process for team leads and for our data collectors. And we want to thank them immensely it was a hard data collection process, and we want to thank all the persons who gave time and effort to the data collection process. We also use an electronic data system software, what we should call ODK, Open Data Kit, and that was what was used to collect the data. And so the data collectors were also trained in that during the training process. We also included within the training non-judgmental interviewing. So we tried to mimic the scenarios and sort of train the interviewers so that when they went into the field, they would ensure that they were non-judgmental. Jamaica was the first VAX process to use audio computer-assisted self-interviewing. So we are actually the first, and because of our use of ACASI, which is a short for it, they were able to utilize it in the US domestic vax that is currently underway. It allowed for privacy with answering sensitive personal questions using a tablet with headphones. And given our mandatory reporting laws, we reduced the risk to the interviewer by ensuring that the answers for sensitive questions related to sex, physical violence, suicide was answered within the ACASI platform. Community entry was extensive, which we included the JCF, the Jamaica Constabulary Force. We used a graduated consent process. So the survey protocol was independently reviewed and approved by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Institutional Review Board, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, IRB, and the University of the West Indies, IRB, to ensure appropriate protection for the rights and welfare of human research participants. The graduated consent process meant we went to a household, we would have spoken to the head of household first, and we would have sought permission or consent. Then we would speak to the guardian of the child if they weren't the same person, and got consent, noting, however, that using WHO guidelines, we did not tell them exactly what the survey for the protection of the participants. We told them that broadly, that it was a youth health survey, and once they gave permission for us to, especially for the 13 to 17-year-olds, for them to participate, then we informed them of the nature of the study and got whether it was consent for the 18 to 24-year-olds or assent from the minors. For minors who are emancipated, those who are 16 and 17-year-olds who are married, they were allowed to give consent. For this process, we also developed an extensive response plan. With a lot of our partners, we employed psychologists and social workers to support this activity. And so once it is a participant within the platform on the tablet indicated violence in the past 12 months, they were upset by the interview, they attempted suicide, they requested help, they would have been referred into the response plan. If there was any acute safety issues, like immediate danger, recurrent thoughts of suicide, currently experiencing physical and sexual violence, they were automatically referred to the National Children Registry in alignment with mandatory reporting requirements. All participants were given a list of available services, whether social services, programs, amenities, and all participants were given mobile phone credit at the end of the interview to call any service that they needed. The data collection process was between September 2022 to March 2023. We had a response rate of 64.5% of males, 63.3% of females, and we collected in total 1,512 participants, 757 females, 755 males. And of course, our analysis was done for the full sample as well as the gender and age difference across the sample. So let's talk a little bit of what we found in our participants, and noting that the data collected is representative of Jamaica. It's not based on just this study. Whatever is presented says that across Jamaica, this is what is happening. So among our children and youth, and this is for the ages 13 to 17, 9 out of 10 females and males attended or completed secondary school, and same 9 out of 10 are currently enrolled in school. And I think that is congratulations to the Ministry of Education on the work they've been doing to get our youth educated. Above 1 in 4 females and males experience food insecurity. More than 1 in 10 females and 1 in 5 males worked for money or payment in the past year. More than 1 in 10 females and around 1 in 3 males ever had sex. And that's for your 13, remember this is 13 to 17-year-olds. Around a half of females and a third of males had some or severe functional disability in one or more of the functional disability domains. and more than 1 in 10 females and males had lost one or both parents in childhood. For the 18 to 24-year-olds, more than half of the females and 7 out of 10 males attended or completed secondary school, and almost half of the females and a quarter of the males have attended post-secondary institutions. Around 1 in 4 females and males experience food insecurity. More than 2 out of 3 females and males had worked for money in the past 12 months. More than 7 in 10 females and males ever had sex. More females than males were ever married or cohabited. Almost half of females and a third of males had some or severe functional disability in one or more of the functional disability domains, and more than 1 in 10 females and males had lost one or both parents before the age of 18. So let's dive into why you're all here today. Let's look at the key findings and major takeaways of the Violence Against Children and Youth survey. So we've heard this. Violence against children and youth in Jamaica is common. More than 3 in 4 females and males aged 13 to 24 have experienced physical, sexual, or emotional violence in their lifetime. More than half of both males and females aged 18 to 24 have experienced violence in childhood. So when we look at the 3 forms of violence that we measured, females reported emotional violence the most, males reported physical violence the most. So what is physical violence? Physical violence is defined as the intentional use of physical force with the potential to cause death, disability, injury, or harm. We already said that for physical injury, we had 1 in 3 females and 1 in 3 males who experienced physical violence in their lifetime. And in terms of perpetrators, parents or adult relatives and peers are common perpetrators of lifetime physical violence. Girls reported parents and adults more, adult relatives more, while males reported peers more in terms of perpetrators. One of the things that definitely came out in our bilateral and data to action discussions was the fact that despite our rates of physical violence, our children reported that they had high levels of parental monitoring and supervision, 94% for females, 90% for males. They reported it's less in terms of the report for close relationship to their mother, but still high, 90% for females, 95% for males. 70% for females, 88% for males, and easy to talk to father was even less. However, we know that use of positive parental discipline in the last 12 months was 42% for females and 30% for males. When we looked at some of the norms, males were more likely to believe in corporate punishment and endorse traditional gender and sexuality and violence norms than when compared to females. More than half of children and youth who experience physical violence had the first incident at ages 12 to 17. When we look at perpetrators, around half of children and youth experience an injury due to physical violence, and for females, the most injury was reported among intimate partners, and for males, again, it was reported among their peers at 51%. So let's move into sexual violence. Sexual violence encompasses a range of acts, including completed non-consensual sexual acts, attempted non-consensual sexual acts, non-physically pressured sexual acts, and unwanted sexual contact. 1 in 4 females reported sexual violence, and 1 in 10 males reported sexual violence. As you can see, it impacts our females more than it does impact our males. So significantly more females than males experience lifetime sexual violence. And here we have the breakdown of the different types that were assessed in the survey: unwanted sexual touching, unwanted attempted sex, pressured and coerced sex, physically forced sex. Many victims first experienced sexual violence at age 13 or younger, with 43% of females reporting first experience less than age 13 and younger, and 37% of males reporting less than 13 or younger. Nearly 1 in 5 females had a first sexual experience that was physically forced or pressured, and there was a statistically significant difference between males and females. When we look at the 13 to 24-year-olds, we found that female orphans, youth who have experienced food insecurity, and females with severe functional disability were all significantly more likely to experience sexual and physical violence in the past 12 months. Among the 18 to 24-year-olds, females who had to work for money or payment experienced more physical and sexual violence than those who did not, and females who attended or completed secondary school or less were more susceptible to sexual and physical violence than those who were not. So when we look at sexual violence and the perpetrators, one thing that stood out to us in our review of the data, that for most victims, it's someone known to them. And it's occurring in familiar locations. So it's happening at home. It's happening in the neighborhood. It's, the response options for common perpetrators were partner, relative, friend or neighbor, and other, and due to the use of ACASI, we are unable to break out other, but as you can see in both males and females, other featured. However, friend and neighbor was the highest for both males and females, with 46% of females reporting perpetrators being a friend or neighbor, and 50% of males reporting friend or neighbor. And again, most common location, home setting, 52% for females, 57% for males. Are our children getting the necessary services needed? So while a significant proportion of our children would have told somebody about the sexual violence that occurred to them, we noticed the fall off when it comes to actually seeking care. So 53% of females, 35% of males told somebody, and it was most likely a friend or a neighbor that they would have reported it to. 55% for females, 60% for males reported to a friend or neighbor. 40% of females and 31% of males knew of places to seek help. 10% of both males and females actually sought help. And 7 and 8% of males actually received services. Now, when we notice that gap in seeking services among the victims. When we look at where help was sought, we found that for females, they went to the police or other security personnel, 63%. They went to social worker, guidance counselors, or other counselors at 61%, and they would have reported to CPFSA, CDA, or OCA at 60%. However, there's a difference for males where most would report to the doctor, nurse, or other healthcare worker in a hospital or clinic at 99%, and police or other security personnel at 54%, noting that that estimate was a bit unstable, hence the asterisk. So that's our summary of sexual violence. Let's move into emotional violence. And WHO provides this definition. Emotional or psychological violence include restricting a child's movements, denigration, ridicule, threats, and intimidation, discrimination, rejection, and other non-physical forms of hostile treatment as emotional violence. And for the survey, it varied according to perpetrator. More males than females experience lifetime emotional violence, and peers are the most common perpetrator of emotional violence among our children and youth. And that's, it summarizes our emotional violence data, and perhaps in further documentation, we'll review that a little bit more. When we look at violence in the community, and this was particularly included in Jamaica VAX as a request from key stakeholders, we found that females and males were affected by violence in the community, and children or youth are exposed in their homes and communities, with 45% of females and 38% of males witnessing physical violence in their home during childhood. 63% of females, 67% of males saw someone get attacked outside of their home or family environment during childhood. And it's not just simple violence, it's severe forms that our children and youth are exposed to. 34% of females and 42% of males saw someone stabbed with a knife or sharp weapon or shot outside of their homes. Nearly 1 in 3 females and 3 in 10 males knew someone close to them who had been murdered. And what is the impact? So, members of a gang in the past 12 months, this is something that was brought up in all of our planning discussions around what's the participation in gangs among our youth, because we're seeing an increased number of reports of children being involved in gangs. We found that 2% of females, 3% of males reported being members of a gang in the past 12 months. Around 10% of both males and females felt threatened by gang activities in the last 12 months. 15% of males, 16% of females experienced or witnessed gang activity in their neighborhood, and 24% of females, 32% of males witnessed gang activities in our schools. Our children are also carrying weapons. They say often for protection, but nearly 1 in 10 females, 1 in 5 males ever carried a weapon. Gun, knife, cutlass, ice pick. Of those who carried a weapon, 2 in 3 females, 1 in 2 males carried a weapon in the past 12 months. So what are some of the associated negative consequences and risk factors that we identified in the VAX survey? So we're looking at violence and victimization associated with negative consequences among females 13 to 24. Females who experienced lifetime sexual, physical, or emotional violence were significantly more likely to have mental distress in the last 30 days, ever thought of suicide, and ever intentionally harmed themselves when compared to females who did not experience each type of violence. For those who experienced sexual violence, they were significantly more likely to binge drink and ever had symptoms or diagnosis of a STD. For those who experienced emotional violence, they were significantly more likely to ever had symptoms or diagnosis of an STI. When we look at our males, more males who experienced sexual violence were more likely to ever think of suicide, ever intentionally harm themselves, smoke cigarettes, or smoke marijuana when compared to males who did not experience sexual violence. For those who experience physical or emotional violence, they are significantly more likely to have mental distress in the last 30 days. And those who experience lifetime emotional violence were significantly more likely to have symptoms or diagnosis of an STI, smoked marijuana within the last 30 days. So when we look at sexual risk-taking behaviors and associated risk factors, we found that among our females, 11% of them reported early sexual debut, which is before age 15, and we found that 37%, which is significantly higher than our females, reported early sexual debut. We had 11% of persons reporting adolescent pregnancy, 12% of females reporting binge drinking in the last 30 days, and 21% of males reporting binge drinking in the last 30 days. When we spoke about transactional sex in the past 12 months, noting we collected the data a little differently for males versus females. For females, we looked at those who received goods, money, or service in exchange for sex. And for men, we looked at those who provided goods, money, and services in exchange for sex. And when we do the next facts, we'll ask it a little differently. 10% of females reported transactional sex. 17% of males reported providing goods, money, for transactional sex. 27% of females reported 2 or more sexual partners in the past 12 months. 63% of males reported 2 or more sexual partners in the past 12 months. And when we look at infrequent condom use across more males and females, around 50% report infrequent condom use. So, as I said, one of the best practices of VAX is that it doesn't just stop at collecting data and putting it on a desk to gather dust. We actually move into the data to action framework. And this was developed with the support of UNICEF for our VAX data. So we use the INSPIRE strategies from the WHO CDC document that looks at 7 specific strategies when it comes to violence prevention. It looks at implementation and enforcement of laws. It looks at norms and values, safe environment, parent and caregiver support, income and economic strengthening, response and support services, and education and life skills. So over the last year, we started the data to action process, we would have met with stakeholders, we had bilateral meetings, we had a data to action workshop with partners from across the island, and then we had a youth forum that helped us to look at these strategies, look at the VAX data, and see what were the best recommendations coming out of the VAX for our children and youth to promote violence prevention. So in terms of when we looked at implementation of laws and enforcement of laws, we talked about strengthening policies, laws, and regulations, adopting and implementing legislation that banned corporate punishment, strengthening legislation that limit children and adolescents' access to firearms and weapons came out as some of the top areas for discussion. Norms and value, look at social and behavior change strategies, develop and implement a community mobilization to end violence against children. When we look at safe environments, and we saw that the home, coming up as a common location, reducing violence by addressing hotspots. We also looked at parenting and caregiver support, and I highlighted that earlier, that while our children and youth report supervision and report relatively good relationships with parents, there's a discrepancy in terms of the violence that is being met to them and who is meeting the violence to them. So, looking at parenting and caregiver support, strengthen and expand parent and caregiver programs to reduce violence, abuse, and neglect of our children and adolescents. Looking at response and support services, we saw the fall off from telling someone to actually seeking care, and to improve our governance and coordination, improve access to quality mental health and psychosocial support services, develop child protection early warning systems, or strengthen child protection early warning systems. And then we look at education and life skill, establish a safe and enabling environment in schools and homes, and strengthen and expand school-based prevention programs. So some of the key considerations that came up from our discussions that we just wanted to highlight here, ministerial level champions. It's an all-hands approach. It cannot be one ministry, it has to be all that supports violence prevention. Continued support for the Intersectoral Committee on Children and Violence, building on the 2016 NPA CV, which spanned 2018 to 2023, a central repository for data. When we spoke to partners, everybody was collecting data in some shape or form. However, there's no central way to look at all of that data and analyze what's happening and put plans in place accordingly. Input in parenting support, activities to address cultural norms, resource mobilization and allocation, and probably should put that at the top. Reviewing, monitoring, and evaluating existing programs across sectors, building on existing programs and services, strengthening access to services, and accelerating the work in the legal framework. So violence, it's going to happen. However, it's preventable. There are good practices and effective strategies for preventing violence against children. Thank you for improving the lives of our children and youth. And I just want to thank specifically these agencies who have worked tirelessly to get this process to this point.
Dr. Kellyanne Gordon Johnson. Wow, how are we feeling? I feel like I have to do a check-in. Maybe we need a wellness bench. How are we feeling?
Yeah.
Heavy, right? Distressed. Yeah. What else? So we're doing a check-in because we just got a hard hit with some data. But we got some hope at the end because there was that data to action framework and the discussions about what has been done to design and develop that framework, and some opportunities from ministerial champions to ways we're going to try to change culture to make it safe for all our children, right? The methodology itself provided so much care and consideration for children during the process, and I found that particularly interesting, including even the opportunities for referrals and the opportunity for children to get some credit to call somebody if they needed help. So commendations to the team for that approach as well. And I'm certainly looking forward, and I know many of us are looking forward to the report, so we can see more on the emotional violence elements as well. But ladies and gentlemen, we now want to, given that I've given you a breather, right? I wish there was something else I could do to make us feel a little lighter, but we really have to just confront the facts right now, yeah? We're opening the floor now for a brief question and answer segment, allowing journalists present and audience members the opportunity to engage with Dr. Gordon Johnson. Now we're going to keep this brief, so if you have a pointed question, a note of clarification, I encourage you to use this time to engage, question, and share insights on how we can collectively make an impact, but bite-sized comments, please. If you have a question now, please raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you. Have a question here at the front.
Congratulations to the research team and actually those who designed this. This is a rich source of information for policy making and programming to support our children in Jamaica. So thank you so much for, and I also really want to thank you for how you went through the presentation, very helpful. Because I work for UNAIDS, you had indicated as part of your objectives that you collected some information on HIV. I don't know if because probably of the sensitivity of that information it wasn't shared, or it would be good to know what were some of the specific HIV-related findings that will be relevant for the type of programming that we are engaging. And I really do like the aspect emphasizing the need for mental health support. That is critical regardless of whatever age the child is. So that's a very important point. Thank you so much.
Our initial objective was actually to see if we could collect some HIV prevalence data. However, in discussing with key stakeholders and when we went to the IRBs, that was not approved. So we were unable to collect the prevalence data. In terms of persons who reported being HIV positive, the response was extremely low, so we are unable to report out that data. We did collect some data on, knowledge around PrEP, knowing where to seek services for HIV, what you know about HIV. And I think in keeping with the knowledge, attitudes, and behavior study that the Ministry of Health and Wellness has done, or general knowledge around HIV has reduced over the years. And so definitely it also highlighted the need for us to do a little bit more work around HIV knowledge, knowing where to access services, etc.
Good afternoon. Presentation. Okay, I'm hearing it now. Very comprehensive. I just had a quick comment or really a point of clarity in terms of your distribution. I know you mentioned the sample. Very well done in terms of the methodology and how you really broke that down for us. In terms of your sample, is there any insight that you have in terms of between urban or rural responses in your data collection process?
So I think it was not, there wasn't any statistically significant differences between urban and rural. We cannot disaggregate by parish, because that has been a question that has been asked, but how the sampling was done, we are unable to disaggregate by parish, and there was no statistical significant difference noted in urban versus rural.
Thank you very much. Very useful, extremely important, and commendations to the team for the sensitivity, as Richard said, just in gathering the data. A lot of times in Jamaica we are challenged by low trust, low social capital, and to get the data, huge commendations, because you were very careful in how you went about. Is there any way, or was there any attempt to cross-reference? So you would have given tools to some of the respondents to follow up. So you've created awareness, created knowledge, given facilitation by credit to make the calls, etc. Was there any attempt to cross-reference? Just for numbers, was there an increase in persons who checked in, increase in persons who made calls, who went into centers where they could get help? I see many areas for continued research, as you've hinted at. So we look forward, but I think this is extremely important. But just wanted to know if you've seen any response.
I don't have the numbers on the top of my head. I'm going to ask my colleague, Denise McFarlane, who was responsible for the response component, to just speak to the numbers that we're seeing as it relates to response planning.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Henry. We have not yet analyzed that section of the data, as we were concentrating on the major report. However, there was a solid response plan system where if a child was experiencing any form of violence, they would be connected immediately and directly to the CPFSA. So this data that CPFSA has, we are going to be picking that apart to look at the number of reports that came in, if any perpetrators were, the follow-through to the end, how many calls came up to the agencies, and so we can have a really good full report on that section of the study. It was very important. Thank you.
What Denise said is that there was a point in the data collection where the calls were coming in, and the service providers were saying we can't handle, and then we had to be sort of adjusting our psychological and social work staff to support a little bit more in the field. So there were significant numbers of calls that came in, but we'll give you updates in terms of the actual number at a later date.
All right, we're going to take 2 final questions. 1, 2.
Following on, thanks so much. Elizabeth Ward, did you identify what type of response services the youth wanted, and was it different for males and females?
I don't think we captured that, Dr. Ward. I don't recall that being a data element that we captured.
Yeah, because, you know, it really is a question that we ask. Are we providing them with what they need or want, especially in these changing times, and what are the methods in which we need to help them get access to the right services?
Okay, thank you. Agreed. That's something we can look into. I probably will look back at the data set if there were any elements that could sort of give an association to that, and provide that update at a later date.
Thank you. Could you please stand so they can see your hand for the question? Yes.
Thank you. Shauna Trolls from the Ministry of National Security. I thought you did an excellent presentation. I want to ask a question about the cross-reference in terms of the impact. So the data presented indicated the impact for self-harming and abuse, but I wanted to know, was there a question where the victim becomes now the perpetrator of violence? And how do we plan to follow that up? Because that is one of the main things, protecting the victim and making sure that they don't become the perpetrators of violence.
So there were some questions that asked about the person reporting being a perpetrator. I did not present those here today, and I'm going to ask everyone to scan the QR code and read the entire report, because we didn't have enough time to present everything. But yes, there are some questions within the survey that ask the children, the participants, and know which is now national data about them being perpetrators. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for participating in that question and answer segment. Dr. Kellyanne Gordon-Johnson, thank you so much for your presentation and for taking us so expertly through the data. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we must ask ourselves, you know, how can we build a better Jamaica when we ask our children to live through so many adverse childhood experiences? When we ask our young people to become resilient simply because they have to. So these are things that we have to consider. And we must always try to get the perspectives of young people as well as the perspectives of persons who serve young people in a very, very direct capacity. So we can even get a better look at how we can move from data to action. Right, Olga? From data to action. And so I'm excited now about this part of today. We're going to have a vibrant panel of persons who are stakeholders and youth themselves to give voice to the findings. As I introduce each member of the panel, I ask that they take their seats on the stage. Let's welcome first Chief Executive Officer of the National Parenting Support Commission, Ms. Kesia Carr. Ms. Carr leads the implementation of the National Parenting Support Policy through countrywide coordination of service providers to parents for the development of effective parenting skills. She's a champion of children's rights and an advocate for social inclusion. Kesia Carr, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Ms. Carr. Next, we're joined by UNICEF U-Report Youth Council member, Ms. Rihanna Robinson. Ms. Robinson, we can congratulate her. She just graduated from the University of the West Indies, and she is a first-year attorney in training at the Norman Manley Law School and the holder of a of her Bachelor of Laws, she graduated with honors. She's a student leader and youth advocate. In her role as a member of UNICEF Jamaica's U Report Youth Council, she focuses on mental health, education transformation, child protection, and food policy. She also serves as a youth representative to the Education Ministry's Character Education Task Force. Let's also welcome President of the National Secondary Students Council, the NSSC, Ms. Laurel Williams. Ms. Williams hails from Clarendon and attends Glenmuir High School, where her peers affectionately call her the class lawyer because of her relentless advocacy on their behalf. As NSSC President, Laurel ensures that the voices of students are not just heard, but are a driving force in shaping the systems that affect their lives. And ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Manager of Kingston Teen Hub, Mr. Rory Roberts. Mr. Roberts has been the center manager at the Teen Hub since 2021. The Teen Hub, conveniently located in the Halfway Tree Transport Center, is a safe space for students made possible through a partnership between the Ministry of Health and UNICEF. Mr. Roberts is the writer, producer, director, and actor for the award-winning TV series Baller, which is popular among adolescents in Jamaica and in the Caribbean. He is credited for spearheading effective and inclusive programs for the more than 100 students who visit the hub in Halfway Tree daily. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our panelists are here to share their insights and experiences in supporting parents and peers affected by violence. Their perspectives will be invaluable as we move from understanding the data to taking concrete action, because we're moving from data to love that you caught that response moment. So, as we have seen, violence against children is widespread. So let's begin the discussion. Laurel, we want to start with you. How can we involve young people in creating and implementing violence prevention strategies within their communities?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Good afternoon, everyone. Could you repeat that for me?
How can we involve young people in creating and implementing violence prevention strategies in their communities?
All right, so first and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that we're all well. When it comes on to youths in this process, I believe that we are, without a doubt, one of the most important stakeholders. Our voices have or are critical in this matter simply because we are the ones that are experiencing it. When I think about how we can really involve youth in violence prevention strategies, I think about building the capacity of the youths themselves. We are the ones that are in the violent situations in schools or in our communities. We ourselves need to learn skills such as conflict resolution, empathy, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution. When we ourselves are equipped with those skills that we're able to handle ourselves in violent situations, we're able to not only de-escalate the situations amongst our peers, but we're able to show others that this is how it's supposed to go. And I mean, that also ties into peer counseling programs within schools, where we know that there are students that are chosen to represent or rather to counsel their peers. Sometimes children or youths rather to hear from their fellow youths than from adults. And so I think implementing programs like that, not only in schools but in communities, will really help the students to, you know, give them that kind of safe space where they can talk to their fellow peers. Those peers would show them the living examples of what they should, or rather of skills and qualities that they must emulate. And it can help them in the process of changing the violent nature of the space to a more safe one. And yeah.
Thank you, Laurel. And I saw agreement from the entire panel when she said the peer-to-peer engagement. That is the way we really need to look at solving this problem of violence against youth, by youth, in their communities. So an important part of the conversation there. Now, Rihanna, I want to move over to you. We know that we have to take a multi-pronged approach when we think about addressing anything for young people. And one of the things that's considered is that young people need safe spaces online too. And we know that online, using our digital platforms, there may be opportunities there. How can digital platforms, including social media, be leveraged as a tool to support adolescents and to spread awareness and prevention strategies for youth impacted by violence?
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here, lovely to see you all. So, from the report, we can see that young people experience violence in several aspects of their lives, whether in community, at home, at school, in the workspace, and even online. And these experiences have deep-seated impacts that us as young people can't necessarily tackle on our own. So we need the support from an outside entity in many instances. And this is made exceedingly more difficult in the context of our society, where we're told that these experiences make us stronger. They're a part of our story. You know, they made us into who we are today. But what we fail to realize is that that also bolsters the factors which negative the accessibility of support for young people and that support that we need. And we can use technology to now bridge this gap and to leverage what tech can offer to alleviate the challenges that young people face when it is that they're considering to seek support. And we would have heard much of that earlier in terms of the trust, the accessibility, and the other instances that I'll get into now. So in 2022, UNICEF would have launched our You Matter platform, which is a text-based service, a chat line that is powered by YouReport, which is a digital messaging tool, where youth can seek support in working through day-to-day challenges that impact our mental health. And when it is that we created this or conceptualized this platform, we ensured that it was curated in such a way where we utilize the advantages of technology to then meet the needs that young people have when it is that they're seeking support. So, as we would have mentioned earlier, there are instances where young people, they know what support, where to seek support, but there's still some drawbacks when it comes to seeking that support. So the first consideration is that youth in violent situations are often unable to independently seek support at a physical location. Because what we have to realize is that environments that are perpetuating abuse and violence, they will not be environments that are encouraging support. So we have to recognize that as a drawback. And on the flip side, even where it is that the issue is recognized, youth may not know where to seek the support. And there are instances, as I mentioned earlier, where we're told that this is your story, this is what makes you stronger, this is who has made you who you are today. So then that also creates a level of hesitancy when it is that you want to seek support. Because if you're being told that this is stronger, then there's no reason to seek support. So we have to get into that as well. So we were able to come to this issue use of technology because you can access You Matter and other solutions like You Matter from your phone at any time of day. So you don't have to access a physical location. You have it in a device that you use as a young person 24/7 through platforms that you use 24/7, which are social media platforms like WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter, and SMS text messaging. So you don't have to access it. And that all rural youth who may not have access to a support system or a physical space that is within their vicinity nearby. Secondly, youth who have endured trauma often don't know who they can sensitive issues. And this is where arose for young people, which is an important issue. So we combated that using technology where trained counselors are able to speak with youth without knowing who they are. So they only know what we as young people choose to tell them. So that was very, very important. And this is something that especially our young men who already find it more difficult in opening up with sensitive information that would make them vulnerable. This is something that they can also use to combat that level or that issue that they have. And then there's the cost of mental health support and relief in Jamaica. We know that it's not free generally. So use of technology also combats this issue.
So Rihanna, we're hearing from you very clearly that apart from the information sharing, the digital platforms also exist as opportunities for us to address the access to services and support challenges that exist. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a very, very important addition to this conversation. Ms. Carr, I want to swing to you because we've heard from 2 youth representatives who have active work in youth organizations. So they're taking to us perspectives directly from young people. But we saw in the report that the children and young people are saying they have strong relationships with their parents, but we're also seeing in the report that many of them say the incidents of violence, the first incidents of violence, are perpetrated by the parents, right? You have been training parents island-wide in positive parenting practices. What has been the impact of these parenting skills sessions on children and families? And also, can you give me a quick note on what support systems and resources are necessary to help the children and youth who have experienced violence in their homes and communities, mostly being perpetrated by parents, family members, people they know?
All right, thank you so much. It would be remiss of me not to say Happy Parent Month. So Happy Parent Month to all the parents of the audience and certainly those who are accessing through the streaming platform. The National Parenting Support Commission really has been involved in the widespread training of parents in effective parenting practices. And one of the things we stress would be positive parenting, which is defined as the use of nonviolent strategies in parenting. Impact is always a tricky question because it calls, especially in the behavioral sciences, for a different type of measurement. But I will speak on it this way. One of the things we have to first understand is that if we don't build the knowledge base, if we don't help parents to understand, first of all, that the practices, many of them, are actually violent, because we find that there is still this disassociation with hitting, pinching, beating, and violence. So a parent might not see that hitting a child is a violent act, or saying something that is degrading is emotional violence. So through education, it's important to make that connection so that parents are indeed able to see that their actions, whether hitting, pinching, beating, hurling curse words, speaking down to a child, is a form of violence. Having done that, because we're also heavily involved in parenting support, hence the name, the National Parenting Support Commission, we have to figure out what supports parents need to transition them now from what they know to actually doing something, which we sometimes assume that because people now know better, they're going to do better. I often say that I have friends who are doctors who smoke, and yet on the cigarette pack it says smoking kills. So what we know doesn't always translate into doing better, and therein lies the problem. So we are building and ensuring that parents know. Now we have to make sure that they're effecting the practices. We're seeing a better reception to changing practices. Perhaps the pace at which it needs to go is not where we are, certainly. We are pretty much a very violent society. The report confirms that. But we're seeing an openness now that we have not seen before. And perhaps it's because we have different agencies, different institutions, whether public or private, coming on board to say, hey, we need to look at ourselves and we need to begin to foster or cultivate that environment where we can first figure out why are we so violent? Because like I said, the dissonance for us is that you're not making the connection what you're doing and violence, the first thing. But also we're finding that there are other things that are leading to the violent practices. So the Commission is also involved in coordinating services that treat with the underlying or the antecedents of violence.
Make those connections for the parents in your training sessions. What are some of the impacts? Any changes that you've been seeing?
Well, I'm quietly getting there. So the first thing is now the acknowledgement the awareness. Oh, I'm now seeing, I'm making the connection, I'm now understanding. The second thing is to replace those tools, those draconian measures, with other situations or other strategies that will enable positive parenting. That too takes time because those patterns of behaviors, we have to break them. Once we find that we're tooling them and we're supporting them, whether it's through a mentorship program and other agencies, we find that the behaviors begin to change. And we actually have parents now in our programs with serious testimonies of where they were in terms of those measures with beating and so on, and where they are now, opening up this space for conversations and understanding. I can't stress enough that a lot of times when we see the violence, it's because parents are not understanding the behaviors that children normally exhibit at a particular age and stage, at their natural and normal behaviors. And if you're teenagers, for example, we're not pushing back on things, we're saying something would definitely be wrong because they're supposed to be challenging. So once we get them to understand that this is not an alien who has now inhabited your home, but it's really what's going on at this developmental stage, it begins the conversation and the retooling process. So we are seeing behaviors changing gradually.
No, that's excellent, because you see, it underscores the point made that the violence is preventable, it's not inevitable. And when you provide the increased understanding, awareness, the information, the other options, change is possible. And you see that point that you made about understanding normative development, and that's not an alien invading. I really am grateful that I spent so much time reading, because I have a 4-year-old, and you see, when he turned 2.5, I thought there was a little alien somewhere in there. But thankfully I knew that this was normative development, and I'm preparing to go through it again because I have a 1-year-old now as well. So thank you very much for that, and commendations on the excellent work that you are doing. Mr. Roberts, I want to swing over to you. When Dr. Ward asked the question about if we are providing the right responses that the young people actually want, it made me think of the work that you are doing at the Teen Hub. And you see so many students daily for a range of reasons, yeah? Can you share with us your experience in creating that bridge between adolescents and adults, and how you manage to create a safe space to support those who have been impacted by violence, and design community programs that provide safe spaces, that support young people, giving them the services that they actually want and need? It's a long question, but I know you understand exactly what I'm asking.
Very, very long question.
Yes.
I feel like you just asked 4 questions in one.
I probably did.
Well, what we do at the Teen Hub is try to really create a safe space for youth and adolescents, and it has been working, and working to the point where the youth and the adolescents themselves are now becoming advocates. Because recently I had a story in mind that I wanted to share, but something happened at my office at the Teen Hub Monday where I had to switch to share this story. So a young lady, about 12, came to my office and she said she wanted her friend to talk to me. So I said, okay, where's her friend? She said, sir, the friend is not here today, but I want you to talk to her. Tuesday, the young lady came to my office and she said, I'm the person that is supposed to talk to you. And I said, okay. Her friend's concern was she was cutting herself. She was harming herself, and she thought that Teen Hub was the right place to bring her friend, because she had been to Teen Hub before. Talking to the young lady, the first question I asked her was, why you cut yourself? And when she started to tell me her story, 1, it was riveting. 2, it reminded me why we do what we do every day. So she's 12, attending a prominent high school. So she started cutting herself when her stepfather, she woke up one morning to her stepfather abusing her mom. Her 15-year-old brother tried to intervene. The stepfather stabbed him in his head. She tried to intervene. He started beating her. But this is, of all what she's saying to me, this is what got me the most. She did not get emotional. And as I said, when I said emotional, she broke down in my office until she said her 6-year-old brother experienced all of this, and she's hurt for him. She's hurt that her 6-year-old brother had to experience what she herself is experiencing. So she said from that's how she started. She realized she started cutting herself, and whenever she's angry, whenever she's upset, whenever something is bothering her, how she doesn't know how to, she go to cutting herself. I was looking at her hand and the scars were there. So talking to her and really asking a few questions, because the first thing I asked her, how long now is this happening? And she said, sir, this wasn't the first time. It has always been happening. So I said, why your mother staying that, And she says, sir, I ask myself the same question every day because that man don't like me. And she knows that man don't like me. So I said, why you say that man don't like you? She said, I'm going to be honest. There was this time, she used the term bullying me. And he beat me one day, and that's where the abuse started. Because after he beat me, I was keeping it to myself. I didn't want to tell anybody. But I was crying, and my grandmother asked what was wrong. And she said she told the grandmother what was wrong. And the grandmother went up to the stepfather and, was cussing him out. And she said from that time, that man hated her. And this is just one experience of several. So the space is important. And everything ties in. Because when I heard the young lady say, peers, your peers are important. Sometimes they are better to hear from their peers. Sometimes we treat children as if they don't know, they don't feel, they are not old enough to understand or old enough to feel or to think. But the truth is, I've gotten more youth and adolescents referring their peers to the teen-hub than adults referring children to the teen-hub, right? And that is because we have continued to create a safe space where they can express themselves. That is why as we continue to create a non-judgmental space where they can be free to express themselves. Sometimes I wonder, I knock myself on the shoulder and say, maybe I allow them too much because some of these things I probably don't want to hear. But you will be surprised. But the most disheartening thing for me is that these children or these young people open up to us about things that their parents don't know. And that for me is the red flag. I fear having my children going through these things and I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of it. So that's where we come in and we continue to create strategies. And what I like, I allow these young people to be very integral in creating these strategies because we assume a lot of the times that we know what they want. And what they want is what we think they want is really not what they want. And sometimes we project as adults, we project as caregivers because in our time, that's what worked. In our time, that's what we wanted. It's not our time, it's their time, and it's not the same. So we create programs. We have one of the programs we have is Impact, Ideal Movement in Using Performing Arts for Change. And what we do is really allow them to use creative experiences to express themselves, whether it's songs, poems, whether painting. And every Thursday, we'll see them coming, expressing themselves, and we see them come from one stage to the next. So once we continue to create a safe space and a space where they can express themselves, and it has been working.
Thank you. Wow. I have to read your shirt to everybody. Mr. Roberts, you're pretty inspiring. And it seems like the young people who come to you feel that way too.
Yes.
That's excellent. Now, I want to round out this panel by asking everyone, you're on an elevator. You're not going very far. UNICEF is on the 3rd floor. So you have 30 seconds to tell Dr. Gordon Johnson, Dr. Henry, Mrs. Saza, and Mr. Brown, any one of them or all of them. You only have 30 seconds. Give them your move from the data we've just been given to action. What's your call to action? Mr. Roberts, I'll start with you, and then we'll come down. You only have 30 seconds because Mrs. Saza is getting off at the 3rd floor.
Boy, you're stressing me. What I'd really want to say is, lovely, I'm appreciative of this information, but I've been into spaces where I've seen these researches done. I've been into spaces where I've seen this information, and it's beautiful on paper. Let this not only be on paper. Let this not only be in this space where we are presenting this to an audience, but let us actually take action, because the work needs to be done. And when I say the work needs to be done, not just the research, not just the findings, but just think way forward. I think we are very reactive, and I don't want us to continue to be that reactive. Let us be proactive and get the work done. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, Ms. Carr, sorry. Ms. Carr?
Thank you. The National Parenting Support Commission does have a program that gives universal access to parents. It's called the Parent Place. So my advocacy is for a re-engagement with UNICEF, partnership to scale up that particular program. It is attached to schools and communities where parents get immediate support to include psychosocial and parenting education. So I would that program with the support of UNICEF.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Carr. Ms. Rihanna Robinson.
Yes, so one call to action that I would have is that where technology can be used to support the solutions to violence against children and youth. But we have also seen where it has been a space where young people have experienced violence. So we need to ensure an online protection strategy for children and young people. And as mentioned earlier, this would have been a promise. Thank you. This would have been as a part of the pledge. This is not working.
Nope, listen, we're going to give her back her 30 seconds, you know. So stay on the elevator a little bit more, please. Go ahead, Rihanna.
Yes, so let me just start over. So we recognize that young people are also experiencing violence on to the use of technology. So we need to implement an online protection strategy for children and young people to ensure that they are protected and safeguarded, their rights are safeguarded in these spaces. This was a part of the promise that Jamaica, as Olga would have mentioned earlier, as a part of 120 countries, would have made just last week at the conference that was held on violence against children. And we have to ensure that this is implemented. It is so important to ensure that our children are protected on these spaces and these young people are protected in these spaces. This is somewhere where we're on 24/7, as I would have mentioned. We spend so much time in these spaces. We have to ensure that they are protected. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. And our youngest panelist, who speaks on behalf of secondary school students across Jamaica, Ms. Lauren Williams, what is your call?
The National Secondary Students Council call to action is simply that all youths at some point in their life have passed through the secondary school system. We spend so much time in school. Most of our days, most of our lives is in school. My call to action is simply that it is within the schools that we must ensure that safe spaces are created within our schools. We have guidance councils at every school within Jamaica, or at least we should. It's important that we build these guidance councils to not just have performative roles, but play an active role when it comes on to students' welfare. You know, actually being a person that students feel as though they can trust, that they can have a kind of personal interpersonal relationship with, that they can come to and talk to about certain matters that they're facing, that they would be empowered in such a way that they would be able to detect signs of abuse, signs of violence, just so that the students know that there is somebody that the school is actually supporting them, that they're for them, and that they have somebody there that is genuine in looking out for them. Additionally, it's important that schools practice restorative disciplinary measures instead of punitive measures, because really and truly within our schools, giving a student a suspension because of misconduct does not solve the root causes. We need to deal with the root causes if we want to actually create real change and a real difference. Therefore, we must ensure that in whatever disciplinary measures that we are giving to our students, that they are restorative, that they're addressing root causes, and that we're actually catering all of our measures, all of our resources to students' holistic welfare.
Wow, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Now, I know our respondent agencies would have simply had to stay on the elevator. Mrs. Saza, you've passed your stop because it was so very important. So we want to just thank our panelists for the very rich feedback we heard from them, from the people who are represented in the survey, and from people who also work directly with youth and parents. With your applause, please help me show appreciation for our fine panelists as they leave the podium. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please keep the applause going for them. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the formal presentation of copies of the Jamaica VAX 2023 report. This report will be presented by the CDC to the government of Jamaica. So I invite CDC Country Director, Dr. Paul Young, to join me on the podium. Also want to invite from the Ministry of Education, Mr. Otis Brown, who will be receiving for the government, and Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry, please join us here. We also have supporting the government, UNICEF. So Ms. Olga Isaza, please join us in participating in this handover. Now, these gestures are very important. So please, can we have a round of applause as we have the presentation of the report for this photo opportunity. Excellent. You have been a fantastic and responsive audience as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen on the stage. Let's get it done. I hear the call to action being echoed over there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying. With the official release of the report, the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information, alongside the Planning Institute of Jamaica, now hold essential insights to drive impactful action. The report is available for download on UNICEF's website and will be widely distributed to stakeholders to guide initiatives that prioritize the safety and well-being of our children and youth. I neglected something and I want us to extend the photo up. So I'd ask all the presenters and collectors to come back up and invite our consultant, Dr. Gordon Johnson, to also come to the stage for this photo opportunity. As you're coming, I'll continue to speak. Today's findings, yes please, today's findings serve as a call to action. Let us all commit to using this available data to make meaningful changes for the safety and well-being of our children and youth, to protect every child in Jamaica. UNICEF's tagline is so simple: for every child. We want to ensure that their safety becomes a priority in every home, community, and institution across our nation. On behalf of UNICEF Jamaica and the Planning Institute of Jamaica, I extend heartfelt thanks to everyone who made this event possible. Our esteemed panelists, Ms. Casey Carr, Ms. Rihanna Robinson, Ms. Laurel Williams, and Mr. Rory Roberts, thank you for your invaluable contributions, short, quick, powerful, and insightful contributions. We want to thank Ms. Tasho from the U.S. Embassy to Jamaica. I want to thank you for the U.S. Embassy's support and participation in today's launch. To our media partners, including the Jamaica Information Service, who streamed the event, we appreciate your presence and dedication to sharing this important message as widely as possible. Special thanks to MRB Trading Limited and Vantage One for their exceptional decor and event planning, and to the S Hotel for providing a comfortable environment for today's gathering. Thank you all for your attention, and please enjoy the refreshments as we continue to network and discuss how we move from data to love it, and we can transform these findings into positive change. I'm Kamisha Swaby, and it was a pleasure serving you. Have a wonderful evening.